Awesome. So it is 10:30, so I thought I would be punctual. My name is Sasha Wood. I work at the New Brunswick Social Policy Research Network, and I'm part of the organizing committee. So thank you so much for joining us today and for being here for our first concurrent panel. So I'm just going to step in briefly and introduce our moderator, who will then introduce our speakers. So our panel today, before I do, I'll talk a little bit about our panel. Our panel is called Millennial, Citizenship, and we'll focus on today's youth who represent the 21st century citizen, and we'll explore how they can engage with a system of government that does not work for the 21st century. Well, I guess that's a question. So our panel will discuss the disconnect that exists between the contemporary model of governance, the future of citizenship, that it means to represent, and examine what needs to change as young people begin to participate substantively in the 21st century society. So our moderator today is Amanda Hashi. Amanda, she is sustainability strategist at Conscious Brands, Inc. Amanda works passionately to help communities and organizations leave this beautiful world even better than we found it. Amanda spent 8 years working in economic development and gained a global perspective during projects in the US, France, Panama, Vietnam, and Sweden. For 4 years, she worked with cooperatives in New Brunswick, helping them with business plan development, member engagement, and sustainability education. Amanda's strengths are in facilitation, public engagement, sustainability, and strategic planning. She currently works as an associate sustainability Sherpa with Conscious Brands, helping companies and organizations achieve sustainability. She is a founding member of La Bikerie Coopérative and a board member of Omista Credit Union, both in Moncton in New Brunswick. So welcome, Amanda, and our panelists. And just a quick reminder that for those of you who are looking, there are simultaneous interpretation, translation devices at the back of the room. So thank you so much. I'm Amanda.
Thanks, Sasha. And I'm going to keep in mind how awkward it is to listen to a bio of yourself when I read yours. Bienvenue tout le monde. Merci pour venir. On va parler de les citoyennes millennials. La traduction que j'ai eue pour ça était post-boomer. Est-ce que ça, c'est la vraie traduction pour millennials en français? C'est quoi? Génération Y. Yeah, post-boomer, c'est comme... Millennials is just... Anyway, donc on a 3 personnes ici aujourd'hui qui ont beaucoup d'expérience avec ce sujet. Donc on va jaser un peu avec eux, puis on va parler avec vous autres aussi. Qui dans la salle pense que je suis je viens de génération Y? I'm a millennial. Who in the room would say that they're millennial? Who in the room doesn't know what a millennial is, or doesn't know the definition of a millennial, or... Okay, great. So, good. We're all on the same page. So we're gonna chat a bit about millennial citizenship and what that means in our current government. All panelists can field questions in French. Tout le monde peut répondre aux questions en français si vous voulez, mais on va parler plus en anglais. Puis si vous avez besoin des appareils, il y a des appareils en arrière de la salle. So we have at my far side here Richard Pietro. He's an open government fanboy who creates civic engagement as art. So Richard has recently released Open, the world's first short film on open government, open data, and open source. But he is mostly known as the guy who rode his motorcycle 20,000 kilometers during the summer of 2014 to bring attention to open government and open data movements. Richard does not work for government or for industry. He's a restaurant worker who simply wants to see progress in our most cherished institutions. So yeah, maybe Richard, I'll give you a couple of minutes to talk a little bit about how you found yourself in open government and some of the things that I mentioned in your bio. Definitely some interesting things there.
So yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get into why I got into open gov because that's a boring story. And that's the problem. Civic engagement is boring as unbuttered toast, and that's the problem, right? Nobody wants to get into civic engagement because they think it's like going to a church basement or attending like council meetings. civic engagement is a bad brand. We belong to a very unique cohort of people that are engaged. So how do you get more people engaged into civics and things of that nature is that you got to bring a little bit more pizzazz, a little bit more fun into it. And that's why I call myself an open government fanboy, because I'm just trying to have fun in the space, right? So I think the big issue about, especially for younger generations, which I'm not necessarily a younger generation type person, but I certainly have the mentality of one, is let's have some fun into this, and especially for the public servants that are in the room, and this is something that I've said ad nauseum for the last few years, is you gotta loosen up a little bit, right? If you really, get out there. Don't be afraid of your own shadow. Instead, learn about moving away from making decisions and just enabling other, citizens' decisions. So the premise is, I'm actually gonna go a little bit away from what Nick suggested to Nora Young, which is, the premise is that we should see government as a platform, as opposed to government as a doer. So for example, Apple, Android, those guys, they're not necessarily in the business of creating apps. They're in the business of creating a place where people can create apps. Government should be that way. Government is designed for one size fits all. One size fits all, people don't want one size fits all. People expect customizability. They expect responsiveness, agility. Government's got to change their whole mentality, loosen their shirts, loosen their stuffy attitude a little bit, in my humble opinion. I'm not indicting anybody here, but if you really want to engage millennials, you got to be engaging. It's that simple.
And next, we have Grayson Johnson, who I've had the pleasure of seeing some of her awesome work here in Fredericton and also in Moncton. She's a communications strategist and urban activist. Grayson calls her work Projects for Places We Live. She mostly helps people and organizations with strategy, research, communications, and outreach. When she finished her master's in philosophy in planning, growth, and regeneration at the University of Cambridge in 2013, she never stopped studying the city. Grayson thinks of her day-to-day as action research, diving into the question of how good neighbors can transform place. She lives with her partner in Fredericton.
Am I supposed to do the same now? my little 3 minutes? Okay. So my name is Grayson, and I've been a millennial ever since we started using that term. My Facebook newsfeed is just blown up with millennials all the time. I spend a lot of time with people my age and people that are not my age, thankfully. So my bio is a little bit about my background working with cities, but long before that, my entire adult life, I've been an activist. And I should say that my disposition is not to be a complainer. I would consider myself just very proactive and really just, I love citizenship. I just love getting in there and, working with my neighbors. So, and I get that from my mom. She's just awesome. So I have spent a lot of time working with other millennials and engaging them with government. So with this question of how do we engage millennials with government, well, that's all I know is working with my friends. And so I started out when I was 19 being very involved, pulling together one of the largest climate mobilizations that's ever happened on Canadian soil. And that was largely led by millennials. And over the years, we found that that wasn't really having the desired effect on legislation, largely because we were in the dark days of Stephen Harper. So we decided to move on. Okay, well, if warm bodies on Parliament Hill is not changing things, how do we engage elsewhere? So then over the next few years, I got involved in media campaigns, basically using the media as a way to bring attention to these issues that were being ignored by us simply talking to our elected officials. And so led many sort of national media campaigns. I've been on national TV a few times, once in my underwear, all trying to raise awareness largely about climate change, but also on the issues of youth and democracy. So one of the more successful campaigns I had with my best friend and all of my friends at University of Guelph was called the Vote Mob movement. And so in 2011, for the federal election, there was a number of us that got together and said, there's this overriding idea that young people don't vote, they don't care about politics. We're young, we're engaged, we're smart, and we're gonna vote. And we just wanna make sure that our politicians know that so that they pay attention. So that was quite a successful campaign. Over 45 vote mobs took place across the country, including one run by UNB. And my friend and I were holed up in my bedroom, sort of orchestrating the whole thing. So that was fun, and that was another way to get involved. And in my more recent years, I've moved from the macro scale of federal policy down to the more micro scale of how do we improve our neighborhoods? How can we just be active citizens and we can take responsibility for things that the government shouldn't have to do? Just how do we get involved in that? And that's what my life looks like a lot now. I call my block the Ministry of Makeshift. We just get involved and improve often unauthorized city spaces. So that's my engagement.
Thank you, Grayson. And next I have Oliver Hebert, a Q&A outreach coordinator with a Q&A outreach coordinator and student at St. Thomas University. Olivia is a second-year student at St. Thomas University, double majoring in great books and sociology and minoring in English. Oliver worked for 2 years on the board of the Fédération des Jeunes Francophones de Nouveau-Brunswick, focusing on creating a network of gay-straight alliance in the Francophone high schools of the province, and is a founding member and outreach coordinator of St. Thomas's New Student Society Q&A, Queer and Applied People's Society. Queer and Allied, sorry. A group focused on creating community and addressing the needs of the queer students at university. Oliver is working towards becoming a social worker focusing on the LGBTQ community and has participated in 3 youth parliaments.
I'm glad that sounded good. I didn't remember what I'd written. So, so I am quite young. I have not been on the job market really much yet. So I'm really talking about, from my experience, trying to be involved with government or trying to be involved in my community to make things change. So in my experience, youth are not interested in politics very much because it doesn't respond to the issues that matter most to them. A lot of us are looking for help with our education, like reforming education, making it more applicable to us, looking to fight for minorities, for First Nations, for the queer community, and the government's not always answering to those needs. Also, recently, I'm sure you guys have heard that voting was made more difficult for us by our good old pal, Stephen Harper. The last elections, I had many of my friends, many of my co-residents who were turned away at the polling stations even though they had the official documentation. They were told that it wasn't the right one, but it had been issued by our university saying that this was our residence, this is where we lived, and students weren't able to vote. So how are we supposed to be, involved and engaged when we're told that our voice can't be heard just because we're trying to further our education and we don't happen to live with our parents anymore? Touching on that as well, our opinions are often ignored. I've had experiences where I've been in rooms with ministers where they're supposed to be there to be listening to the youth's opinion. And on one occasion, thank God the minister's secretary was there because this person spent their entire time ignoring us on their phone, completely disengaged with us, showing us that our opinion, our thoughts didn't matter, even though we were student leaders within our high schools, trying to make change, trying to make New Brunswick better. And I've already kind of touched on this, but certain parties and governments don't line up with our views anymore. As I've mentioned before, the Harper government, for a lot of students, it didn't respond to their needs anymore, and they didn't connect with it, so they felt completely disengaged. So for me, getting involved, my best ways I've often found have been outside of government. I have taken part in youth parliaments to understand our system, because I think that's important. It's hard for me to be involved if I don't understand what I'm trying to work within. I think that's just kind of a smart way to go about things. And that's where I met other youth who were very passionate and engaged. All the parliaments I did were in French, so I met other New Brunswickers who felt strongly about issues, and I was able to connect with them and talk about these ideas, and it was a very exciting and vibrant time, and to make connections with people who had similar passions as me, who lived in other provinces, and I can network with them and talk to them about how we can make things move forward. And then further, with working with NGOs, so she mentioned in my bio that I worked at the FGFNB, which is a Francophone youth federation, and that was one of the most rewarding experiences I've had in my life, because I was able to work on something that I was passionate about, and we had the basis of a good organization to work with the government to get funding for these things that mattered to us. And I found that was the best, most useful way, because we weren't trying to work through the government, we were working next to the government and then turning around and talking with the youth and saying, like, let's make this change. What are you guys passionate about? I think this is an important thing. Are you guys with me? Yes? Okay, let's make it happen. And that brought a lot more change than turning to the government and saying, we need to make this different. We took it into our own hands, and I thought that was really valuable. And then finally, being an advocate for my own change has been the best thing. I've been told by people who are older that it seems impressive that I'm engaged and I'm involved and I go for what I want, but I don't think that this should be something impressive. I think it should be the norm. We have so many ideas, everyone does. We have so many things we feel strongly about. We can make that change, even if it doesn't have the huge movement we could imagine. If we can affect one person, I think that's very valuable, because that person now has found a safe space or thought about something new, or found someone else who thinks like they do. So that's my experience.
Great stuff. Lots of inspiring things, I think, to dig at here. If we are under the assumption that the current government systems, and we're talking the whole federal, municipal, provincial here, don't currently work for millennials, how would you, if you were about to give advice to somebody who's feeling really disengaged, or maybe you have felt that way, or have experienced some barriers in trying to reach something or make some change that you wanted to make, how would you engage? How could government engage with millennials, or how could that communication barrier be broken down? And any of you can kind of answer. We'll just popcorn with who's hot on the mic.
Yeah, that would be me. I found that the best thing is when they take the time to listen. Honestly, conversation is the most valuable thing. One of the things I was most touched by was with our local MP, David Kuhn. He's on campus all the time, and during his campaign, he was there just talking to us. He brought a cardboard sign and set it up in the cafeteria, and it said, "Come talk to your MP." And that doesn't seem like a big thing, but that meant that he gave a damn, which many of us have not had before. So that was, even if people were shy to go talk to him or didn't know what to talk about, we could see that this was something happening. I might have something to add later, but that's all for now.
Yeah, I'd have to echo that. So I'll break down my engagement with government in two ways. So there's engagement with our elected officials, and then there's engagement with our civil service. And I think that those are very, very separate things. In fact, I think that millennials have figured out, as we all have, learning how to cooperate in the digital age, millennials have figured out how to communicate with their elected officials. And at this point, I don't think it's necessarily a structural problem there. I think it's the officials actually taking the time to listen and to appreciate your words. So there are MPs, there are MLAs, there are MPPs out there that are very engaged with millennials, and then there's those that have chosen not to be. And then there's the aspect of engaging with civil service, and for me that's actually been a lot more difficult. And I don't think it's a personal problem at all, and I don't even think it's necessarily a cultural problem with civil service. It's just for people that have not grown up with bureaucracy, we can't speak that language. So the process of trying to get something done through the appropriate avenues through government is it's impenetrable for someone like myself. There's no way to Google how to do it. It's all knowledge that's stored inside people who have lived it. And they have the relationships. They know who to talk to. They know whose receptionist holds the keys to everything. They know the process, and that's not available to other people. And I don't necessarily think that it needs to be Googleable. I think there just needs to be a gateway for people. So, for example, if I wanted to understand how to get something done with the municipal government, it would be really handy if there was just like an ombuds person that I could go talk to, and I would say, this is what I want to figure out. You understand the system. Can you be my tour guide to government? Can you explain to me how to achieve this? And there are probably structural things that need to be changed there, but I won't pretend that, you know, I'm wise enough to know what we should get rid of in government. Like, I'm sure that there's reasons for a lot of things that are there. So that would be my my response to that.
And I'm actually going to add to what you said, because it's a very clear point that most people don't really understand the difference between the civil service and your elected officials. Although the elected official is sort of the entry point for engagement for the most part, as it is currently designed in most Western democracies, I actually have had more luck with the civil service, personally. Mind you, I've worked hard to make that happen. And that's why I call myself not only an open government fanboy, but I'm also a groupie to hero public servants. I am your biggest fan. I go out of my way to help you guys out whenever I have a chance. But real quick, I just want to add more from a solutions perspective. Since elected officials are the entry point for many people who are not engaged, there's a group out there in Canada called Samara. They do a lot of research on political engagement. A number of years ago, they got noted for doing exit interviews with MPs. So I'm going to ask you one question that Samara asked 70 MPs that rank from juniors to cabinet ministers. What is the job of an MP? It's a tough question to answer, right? Because believe you me, Samara said this in the report. They had like 70 different answers. No one really knows what an MP does, because originally the job of an MP was to represent a jurisdiction, because there was no other way to represent that jurisdiction. We had no internet, we had no mail, right? So you needed to elect someone from your community to represent your interests. But now your voice can be heard from anywhere at any time and to anyone. So maybe the job description of an MP should change from being an arbiter to a facilitator. I call it politicians as facilitators. And their job would be to create consensus, to listen, not necessarily dictate, but they say, well, this is what we've come through, and that's what our constituency has decided.
Great, really, really insightful. I would love to hear a little bit, maybe from each of you, a successful example of engagement that you would kind of class as, oh, this kind of engagement would work for millennials.
You guys want to know millennials? Actually, I'll give you guys a quick example of when it didn't work. Toronto has had a big conversation about carding. I don't know if you guys are familiar with carding, but it's the act of police officers going to youth, particularly in the urban centers and all that, essentially black kids, and carding them, taking down their information for no apparent reason. It is very intrusive, and it is very undemocratic and unconstitutional. The government said, we're going to engage into a conversation about carding. But the public, the youth, said, we don't think carding should exist, period. And then the government said, okay, we're going to engage in a consultation, we're going to have a big conversation. But the questions that were asked in the survey were about how to administer a carding program. Once again, like, the youth are loud and clear, saying, we don't want carding. We're not asking to find a solution or a compromise. You're not listening to us. So to me, at least witnessing this conversation taking place, and it's not just youth, obviously, it affects an entire ethnic demographic, but it was really the youth that were active, at least on Twitter, online, and things along those lines, because they're the ones that are being affected oftentimes. So to me, don't tell us what you think we want to hear. Actually, take our words and execute on them.
This is going to sound so trite next to that. I'm almost embarrassed to say it. Okay, so last summer, I wanted to play basketball with my neighbors, and the basketball courts at Queen's Square were not, they were just being repaved or something like that. The hoops weren't up. And so I was able to tweet at the Parks and Rec department of City of Fredericton and ask, hey, when are the nets going to come up? And the response I got was not accurate, but it was a response. So they did respond to me there. And so I thought, I mean, I don't want to turn this into like a technology will save the day, social media, everything, because I'm really sick of that conversation. But I find that Twitter is actually really useful because it's you can have basically a representative online that's fielding these questions from people that they just, when you don't know what the news is or you don't know who to contact, Twitter is often the first place that a lot of young people will go. A lot of older people will go now too. So that was cool. And there's also moments when I'd like to say thank you for things, and maybe there's civil servants in the room that know. This summer I do a lot of running, and on the pathway near Woodstock Road there was a new water fountain, and that was a really, really wonderful thing, and I didn't know who to thank for that, but I feel like that positive reinforcement is also necessary for engagement. I don't want it to always, the typical government as a vending machine model is not, I think, what a lot of people want. They just want to be able to have a conversation about what makes their country, what makes their city a better place to live. And if we can keep offering feedback, positive and negative, I think that would be great. So Twitter has been helpful in that regard. I don't think it's a full solution, but it is sort of that is the natural step that I've come to, because I don't know what email address to call. I don't know the person. I just put it out there, and I hope that somebody else finds it and directs it where it needs to go.
Okay, I think I came up with a coherent answer. I was trying to piece things together. So I think that what has worked best for us, for me, has been to be in situations where we bring the elected officials into our environment, rather than us going to them, inviting them to come be submerged in what we are trying to do. And then they get to experience it with us, because often we get the response, if we just talk to them, that we're just young people who are just ranting about stuff. But if they come in and see what we're doing in youth parliaments and in organizations, at events for youth, they can see the passion, they can see the drive that these kids have, and see that they, that they have thoughts, that they're not just delinquent teenagers. And I think that's been the most useful, environment, allowing them to see, allowing them to experience, because they remember that much more than just sending an email to them or sending them a snail mail.
So I've heard lots of really good things about just come talk to us, just act as a platform or more of as a facilitator. Is if there's some civil servants, or I don't know if there's any, are there any elected officials in the room? Okay, awesome. So what if you're on the other side of the fence, you are a civil servant or you are an elected official, and you got your head down, you're doing your job, and there's a group of people that you want input, or maybe you don't even know, maybe there's something out there that could improve what you're doing, and so there's two people or two streams of people trying to do good work, but just not being able to connect. Is there anything there that you think, advice that you would give internally to government as a way to be a facilitator or as a way to act as a platform?
I would say that there's not a lot of clarity in how to be involved in conversations around policy. So I'm incredibly interested in planning in the city, and I have not been to a planning advisory committee once. I have a master's degree in urban planning, and I live and breathe planning for the city, and it is just not something that I can do because it doesn't work with my schedule. I can't give I don't know when it is, it's not well advertised, all of that sort of thing. I'm never, like, I remember that I missed it 3 hours after it's over, that sort of thing. And a lot of that is I have not put in enough effort, and I'll own up to that. I have not put in enough effort, but it's also not an easy process. It's also really difficult to search through policy online. So, I mean, a lot of you have probably seen that famous TED Talk by a guy named Dave Meslin out of Toronto, and he talks about if government wanted people to participate in the process, they would advertise it like Nike sells shoes. It wouldn't be the fine print somewhere on a dated website that no one would go to. It's going to be a billboard. It's going to be front page of the newspaper. We want your input on this and that. And so I think just better advertising of the opportunities to do that, and keeping in mind that not everybody has a schedule. Like, a lot of young people work shift work, a lot of poor people work shift work, a lot of people cannot take an entire evening off because they've got kids or they've got all this stuff. It's definitely difficult. I don't have the solution for it, but a little bit more awareness of who you're saying is important by advertising in a certain way, because it does exclude quite a lot of people that are not going to be able to participate or feel like they're welcome in that participation.
And once again, like, you're just, springboarding me for a whole bunch of great answers here, Grayson, because development, at least at the city level, the #1 requested open data set that I've been faced with in all jurisdiction is zoning data and development data.
It's so hard to find.
It's terrible, ain't it?
Yeah.
And that's how you get people engaged. Most people are not going to engage in foreign policy too much aside from the headlines, but they will engage with what's going on in the community. If their dry cleaner is being shut down to turn into a condo, they'll care. But they don't worry about that. But they don't know about it. The one thing that I tell government all the time is, you guys are great at collecting data. You're freaking awful at publishing information. Let us do it. Give us access to that data. We'll take care of the marketing for you. You guys don't have marketing departments. You don't have engagement departments. Some governments do. There is a director of engagement with the province of British Columbia. But that's slowly happening. The City of Guelph now has an open government manager. You're seeing these trends happening right now where people, the bureaucracy is allocating resources to outreach and marketing. But it's not enough. Let us help you in that undertaking.
Can you repeat one more time what we're answering? Because I was just like so wrapped up. I was like, I don't know what I'm answering anymore.
If you could give advice to somebody who works as a civil servant or an elected official as how to be more of a facilitator or a platform, what would that be?
Right, thank you. All right. My mind was just worrying while they were talking, so yeah. No, I was thinking that we've been talking a lot about, talking to youth, and we've talked a lot about kind of the separation between government and working outside of that. But I think if officials could kind of bring youth in working with them, not just as pages in the House, because that's a cool job, but you have to be quiet all the time. You can't actually express your opinion. But bringing youth in, like hiring them, working with them or having them as volunteers, like in Parliament with you, I'm sure we can come up with something brilliant to give them as a job. But this way, you're constantly consulting with young people as well as older people. Because a lot of our MLAs, a lot of our MPs are 40 plus. They're probably a little out of touch with what younger people need. If we could bring that in more, I think that we would at least have our opinions considered. We might be disregarded, but then we can at least smack them over their head because we're right there. They're right there next to us.
Actually, can I just throw in real quick something? Because I did get a question on Twitter, which was if I could speak on how a shift will lead to more diverse and traditionally marginalized voices being heard. And this, sorry, I'm not taking over your job, Amanda, but I just did get the tweet here. And to me, the one thing that we got to keep in mind that we always forget is that especially the marginalized voices, they don't necessarily have access to smartphones and Wi-Fi and internet. So we can't just always think about engagement from a digital perspective. We have to go to these community groups. They're always sort of at the grassroots, on the ground level, talking to these people. And that face-to-face goes a long way, right? So when we talk about engagement, it's easy to get sort of pigeonholed in that idea of more digital, more digital, more digital. That's not necessarily always the answer.
I think on that note, in a way, engagement is sort of a luxury. It's if you have the spare headspace, if you have the spare time to be able to look up what's going on, what is going on with the condo and the dry cleaner, that sort of thing. So just keeping in mind that it is a certain subset of people that generally our bias toward engagement. And I think that just needs to be top of mind. I'm sure it is top of mind. I imagine that civil servants talk about this all the time. How do we engage more fully with the community? I mean, maybe, can I put that question out there? Is what are your frustrations trying to, I'm sure that everyone has this intention to be a better engager. What are your frustrations? What are we not doing? What are, you know, what, anyone?
Salut tout le monde. Je vais poser la question par la question, je vais m'exprimer en français. On a parlé beaucoup d'accessibilité. On est dans un monde très moderne où la technologie est présente partout. Personnellement, je trouve que le problème, ce n'est pas dans l'accessibilité, parce que tout le monde peut avoir accès à l'information qui est partagée par les gouvernements dans les différents paniers. Le problème, c'est de la compréhension. C'est extrêmement compliqué pour les gens de comprendre ce que le gouvernement fait, ce que le gouvernement offre, ce que le gouvernement propose. Ce qui se faisait avant, c'était le rôle du journaliste, de prendre l'information, la traduire, puis la mener dans le public. Mais aujourd'hui, ce n'est plus le cas parce que les gens veulent l'information à partir de chez eux. On n'écoute plus les journalistes, on essaie de comprendre par nous-mêmes, mais c'est très, très difficile. Il y a donc une grosse distance entre les gens et les décisions prises au sein du gouvernement.
Yeah, I think a huge priority for governments of all levels is that legislation should be comprehensible to someone with a 6th grade education. You should have a child that can read and understand the legislation, because I have a master's degree and I have a difficult time understanding it. I have a master's degree in planning and I cannot read our zoning documents. They do not make sense to me. So, and that's not the fault of the people that are writing them. It's just, there isn't a priority in translating that language. And so I think that is, that needs to be a priority.
Je veux juste prendre un petit moment pour répondre aussi. Tu parles de l'accessibilité de l'information, right? Parce que legalese, it's not accessible. It may be English, mais c'est pas accessible, right? Et c'est ça le problème. Alors moi, je vais tourner la table sur toi, parce que moi, j'aime bien Mythbusters, right? Et ce que Mythbusters a fait pour les sciences, c'est prendre la langue qui était vraiment difficile, qui n'est pas nécessairement accessible, mais il a mis comme une histoire avec, right? Et peut-être une des choses que tu peux faire, c'est de trouver l'histoire dans le legalese, dans toutes les choses, et mettre le sujet plus accessible. You know, I hate to use this kind of language, but like, dumb it down. Not dumb it down to deliver a narrative, but dumb it down for comprehension so like these people can get more interested in the subject matter.
I'll pass the mic in a second, but I was just doing some work with a municipality that was wanting input on their public transit system. And so 2 years ago, they held a public meeting for input about the public transit system on an evening when the buses didn't serve the town hall. So then this past year, they asked me, well, what can we do to find out? I was like, well, let's get on the buses and ask the people. So then we got on the bus with the new proposed plan and immediately started going up and talking about the whole plan. And I said, no, we need to say, how do you take the bus? And then say, this is how this change is going to affect your bus. Because I think translating a legislative document or just saying legislation is there is still like, where's the part that's important to me, right? And at the time that I need it to be important. So anyway, just to say that as a moderator stepping in.
Bonjour, moi c'est Pascal Haché. Je pense que de plus en plus la population veut faire partie veut faire partie de la prise de décision, veut s'impliquer. Je pense que les outils à la base ne sont pas là. On n'apprend pas ça dans les écoles. On le touche pas. La réalité de l'éducation aujourd'hui ne reflète pas aux besoins de nos communautés. Pour qu'un étudiant ou une étudiante s'implique, il doit le faire à ses propres moyens. Il doit Vraiment, souvent, les enseignants ont trop des grosses charges, qui ne sont pas capables de donner l'attention peut-être spéciale à un étudiant qui se démarque, qui pourrait peut-être avoir performé beaucoup plus, puis devenir un leader beaucoup plus jeune. Mais je trouve que notre système scolaire ne permet pas aux jeunes étudiants de s'impliquer à un certain niveau, puis même de comprendre le fonctionnement de notre gouvernement, le fonctionnement de c'est quoi la base de la prise de décision. Puis je voulais juste amener un projet, le projet budget communautaire que la ville de Dieppe est en train de faire. Je pense qu'un budget de 200 000 $ qui est attribué, ils vont faire une rencontre où les citoyens se rencontrent puis décident de quelle façon l'argent va être dépensé. Ils ont fait ça dans des banlieues de Toronto puis de New York qui étaient défavorisées. Puis les gens qui sont venus participer, c'est des gens qui n'avaient jamais participé à aucun engagement citoyen. Le pouvoir de dépenser, c'est ça le pouvoir majeur du gouvernement ou d'un gouvernement, c'est le pouvoir de dépenser. Puis lorsqu'on a des élus, que c'est eux qui prennent leurs décisions, puis ça devient leur agenda personnel, ça reflète moins, il y a une disconnexion avec les citoyens. Mais je trouve que les budgets communautaires, on devrait les voir partout. Il devrait y avoir 10 à 15 % de tous les budgets gouvernementaux qui soient automatiquement donné à des budgets comme ceux-là. Je pense que ça permettrait aux citoyens de s'engager. Ça prend juste un engagement une fois pour faire d'un citoyen un citoyen actif puis qui contribue à la communauté. Donc, merci beaucoup.
C'est vraiment un bon exemple de gouvernement jouer un rôle comme animateur au lieu de doer.
Yeah, as you say that, I was just reminded, I grew up in Ontario, so I'm not actually sure if it's the same in New Brunswick, but in grade 10, did you have civics class? Everyone had civics class? So that was our teachers.
Terrible class.
Well, in grade 10, every student in Ontario has to do a civics class, but even there, they only teach you the structure of government. They only teach you this is how, we have a parliamentary democracy, and here's your MP, and here's the different parties. We're not taught, hey, you're a citizen and you care about something, how do you get it done? How do you navigate government to do that? Who do you talk to? It's never an active process. It's a very much a passive observe and then go to the ballot box. And I know that there's, everyone's got so much that they want to teach, and there's so many changes that need to be done, but that's a very, very good point that, it is something you need to be taught. And there is, unless you have a parent or a neighbor that's teaching you that, I don't know where you would learn.
Ouais, pour continuer sur ça, la seule fois dans mon temps à l'école où ce que j'ai appris à propos de la construction du gouvernement, c'était en 4e année. Je m'en rappelle pas beaucoup. Je me rappelle qu'on avait toutes les personnes élues sur notre mur, puis ils étaient en bleu puis en rouge. Puis je crois qu'on devait faire une présentation sur mais je me rappelle plus qui. Puis donc, ouais, la 4e année, c'est la dernière fois que j'ai appris à propos du fonctionnement du gouvernement. La seule raison que j'en connais plus, c'est parce que mon père est quelqu'un qui est vraiment passionné par la politique. Mais pas tout le monde a cette opportunité-là. Je pense que 2 des grosses choses en éducation qu'on a besoin, 3 en fait, 3 des grosses choses en éducation qu'on a besoin de changer, c'est l'éducation à propos de la sexualité. Ça, c'est la merde. Comment notre société fonctionne, c'est vraiment important. Et rendre l'éducation que ça répond aux besoins des jeunes. Notre éducation fonctionne comme elle fonctionnait durant la révolution industrielle. Et je crois que notre système gouvernemental, c'est à peu près la même chose. C'est plus pertinent.
Juste pas mal vite quand tu marches. Moi, je trouve que le système d'éducation, il faut que ça soit complètement changé aussi. Originalement, un professeur, un teacher, was a source of information. Il était la source. Maintenant, le professeur ne va pas savoir autant ce que l'Internet et la communauté et the networks know and can share. I call myself a self-directed scholar. I never graduated from university, but I think I know more about psychology and neurochemistry than probably most people in this room because I've dedicated so much time to it. At the educational system, in the elementary system, what I'd love to see is teachers become more, once again, this role facilitator, like this is how you use Wikipedia. It's a great place to get information, but make sure to know where the information comes from, right? They help navigate and understand and inspire students to find their own subject matters.
Just to answer Grayson's question, because the points that you brought up are great because we're from the city of Fredericton, so they're valid things that we wanted to hear. And I think the answer to your question is that we're also trying to figure it out. Olivier talked about wanting to come to you to help engage. Richard wanted the access into us, so there's different ways of communicating there. And Grayson, I think you were at some points you brought something in between, like maybe an online forum for participating, like in the PAC meetings, and so we're still trying to figure all that out. How we get the data to you, it's not being hidden deliberately or anything, because it is out there on the web actually with open data access, and that's a priority for us to try and revisit that whole area and provide that information out to you. But we're also looking for that feedback, because that's, as you say, maybe we're the platform and we don't do that development. We want to be involved in supporting the hackathons that are out there and that sort of thing. But how do we engage that? So we're trying to learn from you just as much as you may be trying to learn from us.
And I think that's so important. I mean, this is a growing process. This is growing pains, and we're all going through that. I mean, it wasn't so long ago that government was an old boys club, and the only thing that mattered was who you knew and whose back you were scratching, right? Like, that wasn't so long ago, so it's no wonder that it's taking us a while to transition out of that. And I'd like to say thank you to everyone who is inside, banging their head against a wall, trying to figure that out. And we'll keep banging our head on the door on the outside, and eventually we'll get through. But yeah, I mean, these things happen slowly, and I appreciate that you're here.
And I just want to say something real quick as well, and this is, I hear what you've said from a lot of public servants, and then they go back and I see the same procedures and operations taking place and the same excuses. I love this quote. I used it. I ran for political office 3 times back in the mid-2000s. I call myself a recovering politician now. But I ran for the Green Party. And one of the lines that I had and pissed off all the politicians, the other candidates, was, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. And I find that a lot of public servants come to these sort of type of events and they feel invigorated and whatever and so on. And then they go back to their offices and they do the exact same damn thing they've always done. And then the cycle repeats itself. So my challenge for the public servants in this room right now, if you really do want to engage with the millennials, start doing things differently.
Thanks. Very briefly, Grayson, I do sit on the Planning Advisory Committee, and you're welcome anytime.
I know I'm welcome. It's just not easy to go.
Yeah.
I also don't understand when the planning documents, basically, and like, I should be able to understand this.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's just a comment.
So I guess I'll just a number of things that have been said on the stage, because the question was, what can you do that would help us? And I think that we got some from city staff. From my perspective, and I think, Grayson, your point about the education, we're not being taught civics. People are really quick to talk about what their rights are, but not so quick to talk about obligations of citizenship. And I think that's one of the things that's really kind of missing from it is we're left in this world of, we understand that there are 3 levels of government. We don't know what each level does, kind of. So there needs to be not just a structural, but beyond that is, what is I, as a citizen, what do I need to do? What should I be doing to ensure that down the road I don't have to complain because I actually took the steps beforehand? I don't know what the solution to that is, aside from better education or in our primary public education system. The other one is, in talking about access to data, I agree. For the city of Fredericton, it's really difficult finding policy and that sort of thing online. My sense is it's changing, but until we get to a point where anyone can go and access that information in a legible, meaningful sort of way, there's going to be those gaps and the frustration. So that's me telling you what you can do. Push us and push the provincial level of government for more education.
Just while Amanda's moving the microphone, the other day I was downloading some software to help make a website, and we all know that the terms and conditions are also impenetrable, right? It's the legalese that we don't understand. And I came across, I can't remember which company it was, but they had translated their current terms and conditions, so they had the actual documentation right there. And then they basically had like a little paragraph under each paragraph saying, okay, so here's the deal. You know, you can use this under these circumstances, no worries, that sort of thing. And I wonder if that would be maybe a stopgap measure for a lot of us, you know, while we're re-educating everybody else, while we're working that into the system, maybe just taking what we have and making a very high priority of translating it for everyone. And like I said, if a sixth grader can't understand it, then it's not good enough. And that's not to say, that's not because, you know, I'm criticizing the education levels. No, but children should be involved. Like, children matter too. And that needs to be available to all of our citizens.
Hi. I wanted to see if you had any comment about some of the tools that municipalities have been using to engage citizens in conversations, either as a flow from the citizen to the municipal government or to get citizens to connect back and forth on topics of shared interest.
I can't give you a specific example, but one of the things that I can't wait for government to really get on board of is, for whatever reason, many jurisdictions, whether it's be municipal, provincial, federal, think that they need to create their own engagement platform. The feds did the same thing with their open government action plan. I says, why are you creating your own thing? Why are you trying to create your own backyard when all the kids are playing in the park here? So instead of creating your own place to create engagement, like the UK for now, like right now, they're using a tool called GitHub, which is a code development website, essentially like Facebook for coders, we'll just call it, to source policy and create policy. They're going where people are going. So instead of giving you an example of a tool, like I said, I did with GitHub, government should get out of this mindset of we got to create our own proprietary thing. There are tons of tools out there. Start using them.
And I guess I was commenting that there are other tools out there, and like even the town of Dieppe is using it.
Yeah,
Calgary,
the participatory
so,
budget. Yeah.
So I just wanted your comment on the merits of those tools.
Everyone, I mean, Stanford, I believe, is studying the participatory budget at Dieppe right now. So we're all, you know, on the fence figuring out how that works. And I mean, I'll have to pass that over to our friends from Dieppe to be able to respond to that. It sounds like a great idea. I'm so glad that experimentation is going on. And I think, I mean, that's also a part of it. Another tool is just trying to reduce some of the fear that I think there is within government, fear of people losing their jobs, fear of liabilities, fear of all of this stuff. I mean, when you're saying, you know, lighten up to civil servants, I kind of feel like lighten up to everybody else. Like, if we want to change, we need to give people the space to do that. And it's not like our government is like free of mistakes or anything like that. So anyways, that's a little bit of a rant.
We've talked about how a lot of the way our system works right now is inaccessible to people for whatever reason. You know, hours don't work. I think something like this is breaking that cycle because it's offering the opportunity for people to get involved, and it makes them show that what they're saying has value, or what they think is a priority in their community has value, which will then in turn make them want to be engaged with this change that's happening because they said, this matters to me.
I just want to add one thing, because it's a really good question.
One last question.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm finding this very interesting. As you know, a facilitator of learning, I'm trying to help young people understand where the authoritative voices are in different conversations. So as we try to engage more closely with millennials on the platforms that they're using, how do we discern which are the authoritative voices and not simply sort of the popular voices, you know? Because I know how to go to different websites and understand where that's coming from, but how do we understand that in the platforms that you're using? How do I determine what's an authoritative voice from what's just a popular voice?
Just for clarification, do you mean like, how do you get the kids to realize that, or how do you realize that?
Like, we're the trolls, like, we're not the trolls.
Okay, because that changes my answer.
There is a tool out there called liquid feedback, It's more from a governance perspective, but I'm seeing a lot more tools being developed on the premise of reputation. Very similar to what eBay did with sales, right? So for example, in order to have a comment posted, say on YouTube, well, let's just say that this system existed in YouTube, your comment would only get the real estate and the priority if you had a good reputation of this person, Richard Pietro, is a valued contributor to this community. Whereas if you're a troll, if you don't talk too often, then your reputation will be lower, and thus your comments would not get the kind of priority that, say, other people's comments would have. So to answer your question, there are, like Liquid Feedback is working on that a little bit, and there are a few others that are working on the same premise.
One final comment on that is just, I don't think that we should be using these tools necessarily to formulate our policy. Just like, you know, CBC had the vote compass thing in the past couple elections. If they used just the opinions of the Canadian public to make their policy, I mean, so many people are uninformed, that would be a really bad idea. I think it's good to just know what people are saying and then have evidence-based policy around that. But I would only use those tools to engage and to understand what people are saying, not necessarily as the what to go by. But I mean, maybe that's a slightly technocratic perspective that I have.
Okay, I'm just kind of wondering if maybe if you're an educator, do you need to sift that out when talking to the youth about it? Because you're talking about critical thinking. I think this would be a really great opportunity to get youth to figure that out for themselves instead of giving them the answer, being like, hey, here are some people, and you know that there's ones who are not valuable in there or that don't work, but getting the kids to figure that out for themselves and explain why. Why doesn't this work? Why isn't this okay? Who is saying what's important? How are they saying that? Because that's something that I found that was lacking when I was in school until I got to university. I hadn't been challenged to think about what I was saying in that way and think, oh, maybe I'm a complete idiot. Maybe I should rethink this.
So critical thinking skills and educating both sides of the story, I think, is a real common theme we heard today. And I thought really interesting that you answered a question via Twitter about how to engage with diversity, Richard, and your answer was, technology is not the answer. Yeah, good. So keep it simple, kind of meet them where they're at, and education from both sides. So thank you very much to the panelists, and sorry to anybody that didn't get questions, but feel free to speak to the panelists as you see them throughout the day.
And thank you to Amanda as well. Thank you to our moderator, Grayson, Richard, and Oliver. So thank you so much. And the next session is the lightning talks that will be taking place in the ballroom. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.